So far in this chapter, Geisler and Turek has been trying to use the origin of the universe as a proof of God. And today they're going to continue their discussion by trying to prove that the universe must have a beginning, even if scientists find out someday that the Big Bang Theory was wrong. Unfortunately for Geisler and Turek, they're going to be successful beyond their wildest dreams. Hey there, folks. Bertram the Barely Bearable Atheist here, continuing our series on the book I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist by Norm Geisler and Frank Turek. We's getting near the end of Chapter 3, and it's all over but the shouting for the cosmological argument. There ain't never been a time when the universe didn't already exist, and therefore there ain't never been a nothing for the universe to be created out of. But Geisler and Turek don't want us to know that, and so they's marching on regardless. It's pretty clear that their whole argument is mostly motivated by the Big Bang, at least emotionally, but in fact the cosmological argument has been around a lot longer than the Big Bang Theory, and Geisler and Turek hate to let a classic apologetic go to waste, so today they's taken up the topic of what if science someday disproves the Big Bang? Quote, given the wide scope of the evidence and the ability of the theory to correctly predict so much observable phenomena, a total abandonment of the Big Bang would be extremely unlikely. Nonetheless, let's play skeptic's advocate for a second. Let's suppose that at some point in the future the Big Bang Theory is deemed wrong. Would that mean the universe is eternal? No, for a number of reasons. End quote. Skeptic's advocate. I see what they did there. But you know what? So far they ain't doing a bad job of practicing skepticism. They's exactly right. Knowing how the universe did not begin don't tell you nothing about how it did begin. If it turns out not to be the Big Bang, that don't prove that it was a steady-state universe, nor a special creation, nor Lisa the Rainbow Giraffe, leaf be upon her, dropping a cosmic load. Ignorance means not knowing. It don't mean God did it. So if we ever find out that it wasn't the Big Bang, then we'd have to start over and find a new answer. Which, on the other hand, probably wouldn't be a problem, because the most likely way to disprove the Big Bang would be to come up with a theory that did a better job of fitting the evidence. So it wouldn't be so much a matter of throwing away the Big Bang, it'd be more like a upgrade to the existing science. Anyways, that's obviously not the line of reasoning that Geisler and Turek's going to follow. They's going to offer 4 arguments they think positively rules out any possibility of an eternal universe. Now, the first 2 is based on a review of the second law of thermodynamics and Einstein's theory of relativity, which we already covered earlier in Chapter 3, and Geisler and Turek don't add anything new here, so we don't need to repeat that. The third argument, though, is kind of unique, and it's worth taking a closer look at. Quote, as many of us learned in high school chemistry, radioactive elements decay over time into other elements. This means that if all uranium atoms were infinitely old, they would all be lead by now, but they're not. So the Earth cannot be infinitely old. End quote. Now, I don't know about you, but in my high school, we studied radioactive decay in physics class, not chemistry class. And it's true, you can't have an infinitely old uranium deposit. But what made my eyes bug out was that very last line about the Earth being infinitely old. Say what? As far as I know, don't nobody say the planet Earth itself is infinitely old. Is they arguing against some kind of weird flat Earth ideology? It don't seem likely, since flat earthers tend to favor creationism, and also I don't think there was any significant flat Earth movement back when Geisler and Turek wrote their book. So I guess I'm going to chalk this one up as a cheap straw man, but even for a straw man, this one's kind of bizarre. But now it's time for the main event. The argument that proves once and for all that the universe must have had a beginning, Big Bang or not. Quote, this line of evidence is so rationally inescapable that some consider it the strongest argument of all. It's called the kalam, from the Arabic word for eternal, cosmological argument, and it goes like this. 1. An infinite number of days has no end. 2. But today is the end day of history. 3. Therefore, there were not an infinite number of days before today. End quote. So, just as a side note before we get started, according to Google Translate, the Arabic word for eternal is abdi. and the English word for kalam is speech. Not really important, but as an amateur linguist myself, I couldn't let that one pass. Anyways, back to the argument. Geisler and Turek spend some time illustrating how an infinite past is mathematically absurd. For example, you can't really add 1 to infinity because infinity ain't technically a number and can't be added to or subtracted from. And yet when tomorrow comes, we's going to add today to the number of days that's in the past, which should be impossible if there's an infinite number of days in the past. Then there's a problem of today itself. We can say that as of today, it's been X number of days since some arbitrary starting point. But what absolute day number is it? We can't say that it's X days since the beginning of time, since an infinite past don't have no beginning. We can't even get to today, because first we'd have to pass through an infinite number of days to get here. And you can't get through an infinite number of days. So there may be philosophers and mathematicians who'll disagree on technical grounds, but speaking as a layman, I'm content to agree that this proves to my satisfaction that the past can't be infinite. And in fact, it ain't infinite, and that just makes the skeptic's job a whole lot easier since we only have to account for a finite number of days and not for an infinity. But notice here that this whole argument is based on the nature of history, not on the nature of whatever person, place, or thing has that history. The person, place, or thing is utterly irrelevant to the validity of the kalam. It applies equally to all persons, places, and things that has a history. And notice, this applies equally to any chronological frame of reference. Even if we imagine some metaphysical, supernatural time scale outside of natural time, such that there would be some kind of time before the Big Bang, the kalam still applies. Something that has a past history, even in some kind of metaphysical, supernatural time system, must necessarily have a beginning relative to that time system. It can't be eternal. That means the kalam applies to God himself. Geisler and Turek's kalam argument is so powerful and successful that it not only proves the universe must have a beginning, but any creator God would have to have one too. Geisler and Turek have done roadrunnered their own apologetic. And that brings us neatly to the next section in Chapter 3 entitled, Who Made God? Quote, so why then doesn't God need a cause? Because the atheist's contention misunderstands the law of causality. The law of causality does not say that everything needs a cause. It says that everything that comes to be needs a cause. God did not come to be. As an eternal being, God did not have a beginning, so he didn't need a cause. End quote. But Geisler and Turek's own argument has already proved that this claim can't possibly be true. It's dogma. It's even taught in the Bible in verses like Psalm 90 verse 2 and Deuteronomy 33 verse 27 and a whole bunch of others. These is claims that believers and apostles and prophets make about God in order to impress folks with how great God is, and ain't none of them can possibly be true. Geisler and Turek's own argument proves it. So yeah, like I said, Geisler and Turek's kalam argument is successful beyond their wildest dreams, or maybe nightmares. The eternal existence of their God or any other God is a contradiction of logic. And I'm here for it. You go, guys. You keep on proving that it's logically impossible for anything in this world or the next to have an infinite history. I'll be rooting for you. And they keep on digging themselves in deeper. Quote, yes, it is logically possible that the universe is eternal and therefore didn't have a cause. In fact, it is one of only two possibilities. Either the universe or something outside the universe is eternal. End quote. But that's literally the exact contradiction of what they just got done saying in the previous section. Nothing inside the universe or outside of it, whatever that means, can be eternal. If the kalam argument is correct, then neither the universe nor God can have an infinite past, and therefore each must have a beginning. And I have to point out there is a subtle fallacy here, and that's the assumption that time itself extends infinitely far into the past. If time had a beginning, then the word eternal only means something that's been in existence at every point in time since the beginning. And in that case, maybe it'd be better to say that eternal things has an origin rather than a beginning. They ain't got a cause, and in fact they can't have one since there was never a time when they didn't already exist. but their history goes all the way back to the uncaused origin of time itself, and that's different from something not existent at one point in time and then beginning to exist at some later point in time. So yeah, in that sense, it's possible for the universe to be eternal in the sense of existing at every point in time all the way back to the origin. And in fact, it is eternal in that sense, which means it don't need any kind of supernatural creator. Meanwhile, Geisler and Turek's going to wrap up their self-contradiction by claiming that God is what philosophers call the first cause. Quote, "We can discover some characteristics of the first cause just from the evidence we've discussed in this chapter. From that evidence alone, we know that the first cause must be self-existent, timeless, non-spatial, and immaterial. Since the first cause created space, time, and matter, the first cause must be outside of space, time, and matter. In other words, he is without limits or infinite." End quote. And I'm going to stop right there for a minute because they's already got so much wrong it's going to take some time to go over it all. First of all, they claim they's getting all this just from the Big Bang evidence and not from religion. But it's pretty obvious they's just reciting a theological laundry list of properties that they claim describe their God. And these properties is flat out nonsense, or at least some of them is. This is the same problem we talked about before, where you can put together words like, more people have been to Berlin than I have, and God is a married bachelor whose identical twin sister is an only child of 3 men who never had any kids. Grammatically correct, has the appearance of a meaningful sentence, and completely devoid of any meaning. What would it even mean to say that the first cause is timeless? Does it mean that the first cause did not exist before the Big Bang, nor during the Big Bang, nor after the Big Bang? Because before, during, and after is relationships in time, and if something is timeless, it can't have those chronological relationships. And that means it can't be the cause of anything that happened in time. What does it mean to exist outside of space? Again, inside and outside is spatial relationships. So if the first cause is spaceless, that would mean it don't exist inside nor outside of anything. If it don't exist somewheres, then it don't exist anywhere. And again, that means it can't be any kind of cause, first, last, or otherwise. And immaterial? Well, this one depends on what you mean by material. Material can mean made out of matter, or it can mean things that's accepted as real within the context of materialism, including time and space and changes over time. Geisler and Turek seem to be saying immaterial in the sense of not being made out of matter, but from a layman's perspective, you could argue that energy is immaterial in that sense, which would mean that the pre-Big Bang singularity would qualify as an immaterial first cause. So maybe we'll let them have that one. And self-existent? Well, since the material universe has existed at every moment in time since the origin of time, I reckon you could call it self-existent, since it don't need anything outside itself to cause it to exist. It just already exists. So Geisler and Turek claim the first cause has 4 properties, 2 of which is meaningless and self-defeating, and 2 more that's consistent with the physical universe being its own first cause. And they end with a non sequitur, claiming that being without time, space, or matter, the first cause must not have any limits at all. Which is nonsense, because timelessness and spacelessness is properties that's incompatible with the fundamental nature of causes in general, so clearly they don't imply that there's anything infinite about the first cause. So no, there ain't no logical way to proceed from timeless, spaceless, and immaterial to the conclusion that the first cause must be infinite. They're just calling it infinite because they want the first cause to be God, which is why they call it a he. Moving on, here's the second bullet point of their list of qualities a first cause would have to have. According to Geisler and Turek, the first cause would have to be, quote, unimaginably powerful to create the entire universe out of nothing, end quote. And that's also wrong. First of all, there's never been any such thing as, quote-unquote, nothing, so we ain't got any basis for knowing what the properties of, quote-unquote, nothing would be. It might be trivially easy to create something out of nothing. Heck, nothing itself might spontaneously create everything, as far as we can tell. Might be like how nature abhors a vacuum. After all, literal nothing means literally nothing. If there was a system of physical laws that said it's impossible for nothing to create something, then that system itself would be something. So we wouldn't have a genuine nothing. Under a genuine nothing, there wouldn't be any reason why nothing couldn't create everything, because nothing means not anything, including no rules or natural laws or other constraints that would prevent it. And I'm kind of poking fun here, because I don't think that a lot of folks really think through what it would mean for genuine, absolute nothing to exist. But it's a moot point anyway, because there has never been any point in time when there was nothing. There couldn't be, because time itself is something. So no, it don't take no unimaginable power to create the universe out of nothing, since the universe has always already existed, and it takes literally zero power to quote-unquote create that which has already existed for all the time. Next bullet. The first cause must be, quote, supremely intelligent to design the universe with such incredible precision. We'll see more of this in the next chapter. End quote. Well, first of all, intelligence is a quality that's incompatible with being timeless, spaceless, and immaterial as far as we've ever observed. You can imagine a mythical character who has magical abilities, but that don't mean that any such character actually exists. What's more, it just ain't true that intelligence is required to create complexity. We see natural complexity all the time in the complete absence of intelligent guidance. Just ask any computer guru who's ever tried to create a physically accurate model of a wave crashing on a beach. There's a huge amount of complexity in all them particle interactions, and it takes specialized hardware and software to even get close. But the ocean does it all the time without even thinking. Geisler and Turek is simply appealing to primitive superstition and pareidolia here. And last one. The first cause has to be, quote, personal in order to choose to convert a state of nothingness into the time, space, material universe. An impersonal force has no ability to make choices. End quote. And this one, in my opinion, is the lamest of the bullet points. I mean, it's just flat out reading into the evidence whatever you want to find there. Sure, it's trivially true that non-personal forces don't make choices, but that's just because when a non-personal force initiates an unpredictable change, we don't call it a choice. When one specific uranium atom decays at some specific point in time, we don't say it chose to decay just at that moment. We just say it decayed. And likewise, if some first cause begins to initiate other effects, that ain't necessarily a choice. It's the nature of a first cause that it begins every other effect. It don't have no choice. That's what makes it a first cause. And of course, it's all moot, since there has never been a state of nothingness prior to the physical universe, so even if there was a personal, intelligent, all-powerful being, he couldn't choose to create the universe because at every point in time, the universe already exists. So despite protestations from Geisler and Turek that their conclusions is non-religious, they have in fact reached exactly the conclusion they intended, which was to prove that their own personal God is the creator of the universe. Or at least that's the conclusion they would have liked to bring us to if their arguments hadn't failed at just about every single step. But they was being painfully obvious in how they went about pursuing their agenda. Chapter 3 closes with a Norm Geisler story about how he was in a debate and he asked his opponent, if there is no God, why is there something rather than nothing? And his opponent admitted that this was a good question for which he had no answers. And in Geisler's worldview, that means the skeptic had just lost the debate. Anything less than complete omniscience about every possible question is a defeat, the way Geisler sees it, as long as the other guy's a skeptic. In the real world, though, it's only to be expected that limited mortal human beings won't know the correct answer to every conceivable question. It's easy, of course, to invent wrong answers to difficult questions, but in a lot of cases, it's the guy who admits he don't know something who's sticking closer to objective reality. And I think this is a good example of that. Think about it. Why is there something rather than nothing? From a Christian perspective, God is something. So what this question is asking Christians is, why is there a God rather than no God? Now, an apologist will try and dance around the question and claim that God is eternal and uncaused, but that don't answer the question of why there would be an eternal uncaused God rather than no eternal uncaused God. All the apologist is saying is that the reason there is something rather than nothing is because there is something. That don't answer the question. You can find various ways to describe what the something supposedly is. You can call it the first cause or an unmoved mover if you like, but that still don't answer the question because you're still basically saying that the reason there is something is because there is something. Why is there a first cause and all subsequent causes rather than no causes at all? Why is there an unmoved mover and all subsequent movers rather than no movers at all? The question don't have any answers because the question, why is there something, is actually asking what prior cause produced the first cause. And by definition, the first cause don't have no prior causes, so the question itself is meaningless. But that don't stop apologists from using it to put one over on folks. And that about wraps it up for Chapter 3 and the cosmological argument. Next time, we's diving into Chapter 4 entitled Divine Design. I'm sure with a title like that, we can expect Geisler and Turek to be completely objective and unbiased when they look at the evidence. Meanwhile, thanks for watching, and please be kind wherever possible.